city, your podcast.
I was going to talk about Shang-Chi. I went and saw Shang-Chi this past weekend. Great Marvel movie. It's up there. A lot of people have it in their top 10. It's up there. I'm not putting it top 10. But anyway, that was what I was going to talk about. But then I came home from the movies. I opened up the Bleacher Report app on my TV. I paid $50 for a pay-per-view. And it changed the landscape of pro wrestling as we know it. I, myself, have been a pro wrestling fan since I want to say I was 12 years old, maybe 11. That's when I was very much big into it, watching Monday Night Raw every chance I got. Or I'd watch it every Monday. I'd watch SmackDown whenever I got the chance because, it's Friday night. You go hang out with friends, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I even went to one pay-per-view. I went to Armageddon at Mellon Arena. And that's another funny story is that I was never at Mellon Arena for a hockey game, but I've been there for the circus and pro wrestling, which was WWE. So since then, I've become kind of like, I'll check it out every once in a while. I'll be like, oh, what's going on in WWE? Who's the champion? Oh, it's Roman Reigns. I'm not interested. Oh, who's the champion? Oh, it's Roman Reigns. I'm not interested. Who's he fighting? Brock Lesnar. I'm not interested. Who's he fighting? Brock Lesnar again? That's not interesting. I think you get the point. It's not WWE for a while in the 2010s just was not entertaining. It wasn't pulling the way it did in the Attitude Era, the way it did in the Ruthless Aggression Era, which was the era that I got consumed in. And they couldn't find a face, so they said, we're going to force a face. And no one liked it. I think Roman Reigns is a decent wrestler. Obviously, as we know, he's not great on the mic. He had John Cena roast him for forgetting his lines on a promo. And he's just been forced down our throat for what feels like 10 years, almost. From the time he was in the Shield to now. And luckily, even before COVID, but the boom happened during COVID. We were given a mainstream alternative to pro wrestling. And AEW has gone full steam ahead. And Tony Khan has gone out and recruited the best of the best that he could find that is available. And it's become easier these past couple of months because Vince McMahon is just letting wrestlers go. It's absurd. Now, I want to get more into what has happened these past couple of weeks. With WWE, you had Roman Reigns going up against John Cena for the the Universal Championship. That we knew was going to happen, right? Knew it, whatever. We were like, all right, it's good to see John Cena back in the ring, especially me, who was a diehard fan of John Cena. It was fun to watch. It was good. It was a decent match too. But as that's getting going, there's rumors going around, YouTube videos, people talking. Is CM Punk signing with AEW? CM Punk looks to have signed with AEW. When will we see CM Punk in AEW? For those that may not know, CM Punk is the man that tried his best to change the culture in WWE. But the people he was trying to change cared more about money than they did about pro wrestling. That's why they called it sports entertainment. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, it's pro wrestling, not sports entertainment. I'm not that deep into it. I'm not going to argue those things. Sometimes I call it sports entertainment. Sometimes I call it pro wrestling. But my point is, CM Punk going to AEW solidified the fact that AEW is a place for pro wrestlers to be pro wrestlers. They're not there to necessarily sell a t-shirt. They're not there to be on promotional material for other things that are involved with their company. They're there to give the fans what they want and do what they love day in and day out. And it showed since I started watching and paying attention. And it's obvious. You have a guy like Jon Moxley, who in the WWE was Dean Ambrose and was being told what he had to do in the ring. And you could tell it just wasn't who he was. It wasn't how he liked to entertain. And now he's in AEW having some of the best matches. He's faced off with some of the best competition, like Kenny Omega, who to my knowledge was never in the WWE, but he was always a big name outside of it. They've had some of the best matches, even one that ended quite lackluster whenever they had the exploding ring match. But the reason that was redeemed was because of AEW and how they let their wrestlers just kind of be who they want to be. Because after that match, Jon Moxley got on the mic, said something along the lines of, oh, Kenny Omega is a tough son of a bitch, but can't make an exploding ring for shit. You never hear that from someone in the WWE doing a shoot like that. It wasn't even really a shoot. It was just kind of like, it would be good to say. The ring was supposed to explode. We had some fireworks go off. It wasn't that big. How can I still get these fans engaged in what we just did? And it was perfect. But moving back to CM Punk. CM Punk makes his debut in Chicago, his hometown. You could call it hometown advantage. You could call it a long 7 years. He got one of the biggest pops from the crowd that I've ever heard in my life. Not that I witnessed too many big pops during my time of watching pro wrestling, but that was like, from other people are saying that was like Stone Cold Steve Austin level pop, and that's like the creme de la creme. So, into Sunday night. CM Punk finally makes his debut. He's fighting Darby Allin, who has made a name for himself in AEW as a badass motherfucker. He's a small, skinny dude who will throw his body into anybody and doesn't care what happens to himself. It was a great match. It was a phenomenal match. It ended with signs of respect from both sides. Ended with a handshake between CM Punk and Sting, CM Punk and Darby Allin. And it was what CM Punk wanted to do. He went into this with the goal of putting over young, unknown talent. And that's what AEW's been all about. Using the known superstars and pro wrestlers and whatever you want to call them, using the known people to put over new talent, which in my opinion hasn't been done in quite some time at WWE, because they've been pushing the same dog for almost 10 years. And that's why it got boring. And that's why I tune into AEW now. And at the end of that pay-per-view on Sunday night, we got even more of a surprise. Which wasn't really a surprise if you're into like all the rumor mills and blah blah blah. But after the AEW Championship match, Kenny Omega he retains his title, and he's going on this promo, and he's like, the only people that can beat me for this title either aren't here, something else, or they're dead. Lights go out. My first thought is, I'm getting chills talking about this right now. My first thought is this The Fiend? Are we getting Bray Wyatt in AEW? Because that was in the rumor mill as well. But it ended up being Adam Cole, who some may say could have been a face for the main roster of WWE if he wasn't in NXT, which is a whole nother conversation because NXT has some of the best wrestling, in my opinion, on WWE, and Vince McMahon just hates it for some reason. Anyway, Adam Cole comes out, reunites with his Ring of Honor tag team, the Young Bucks. They, it's a happy time, whatever. It was cool to see Adam Cole in AEW. I kind of want to get his shirt too. All it says is, what does it even say? I think it says like Adam Cole is all elite, baby. I don't know. It was a cool looking shirt. That's all I got to say about it. So they're celebrating in the ring. Then they start beating up on, or they were already beating up on the people that were in the ring, which was Christian Cage. I believe Luchasaurus came out and Jungle Boy. And then you're like, these guys, they're just, Adam Cole's a heel still. Like, he's not, blah, blah, blah. Like, cool. Adam Cole's here, whatever. And then Kenny Omega does a spiel. And then you hear, ba-da, 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 da-da-da-da-da. And Bryan Danielson, is in AEW. The man who defied the odds in the WWE. He obviously was not he's not what Vince McMahon sees in a wrestler because he's not 6'5" and jacked. Comes through the tunnel and out to the AEW crowd to probably the second biggest pop we've ever heard from an AEW crowd. And it was just awesome. It has people excited about pro wrestling again. I'm trying to follow it as best I can. I'm talking a lot with another PodHub podcast, Hermania. Herman does a lot of pro wrestling talk. I know last night he did a on Monday, I would say, he did a live tweet he live tweeted Raw, which he said at the end, I'll never do this again because it's Raw. And he live tweeted AEW. He had a lot more fun doing that. So at least here on the PodHub Network, we're trying to get into that wrestling space. I think both of us, Herman and I, are lapsed fans. We didn't really watch for a long time. We're also part of two different eras. I think he was more the Attitude Era. I was more the ruthless back end of Ruthless Aggression. So we'll be interacting a lot. We'll see what happens in the future about doing a podcast together. That's his choice, not mine. And I just look for us talking about pro wrestling because it's back in the mainstream. And I remember I saw whenever CM Punk came back, SportsCenter put out a tweet about it, and it did huge numbers. And that's another thing is, yeah, WWE is still making a lot more money than AEW. But AEW is, I guess you could say, is doing the fan service, which means they're also letting their wrestlers do what they love to do. Instead of saying, hey, here's your Here's your script. Here's your 5 matches you're going to do in the next couple months. This is what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. AEW is more collaborative. AEW is more creative. AEW keeps you on the edge of your seat more than the WWE. So those are my thoughts on pro wrestling, the state of pro wrestling, where I see it going. I hope to talk more about pro wrestling in the future, but it has to be a pretty big level event for me to talk about it. And this past Sunday on AEW All Out was pretty damn big. And I didn't even get into, I meant to get into this. The women's division in AEW is so much more competitive than the women's division in WWE. They did their battle royale to see who will be the next contender for the women's championship. I couldn't tell you how many women were in that ring, and I was like, all these women should be fighting for the championship. What do you mean? Like, why is... Like, we should have done like a tournament instead of a battle royale. You have Thunder Rosa. You have Jamie Hayter. And even wrestlers I never even heard of were just doing things that I've never seen women wrestlers do. And I was like, this is good. And comparing it to the WWE, your second best wrestler over there has a gimmick that you stole from a guy that you fired. And that's not taking too much away from Alexa Bliss. I know she can wrestle, but it's just, I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. And I've just now started to come around to Charlotte Flair. It took me a long time to come around on Charlotte Flair. I was one of those people who's like, she's there because of her dad, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Whatever. And then you have Becky Lynch come back and they screwed that up. They made her squash the then current champion, Bianca Belair, and it just, I didn't like it. Why? Why put down an up-and-coming superstar in Bianca Belair when you could have done a whole campaign between her and Becky Lynch? That's what it could have been. You could have had her either beat Becky Lynch at SummerSlam or make the match last longer than 30 seconds like it did. That match should have been at least a 10, 15-minute match. It should have entertained, and it just didn't. They wanted to crown their champion again instead of make her fight for it. And I don't think Becky's going to lose too many fans over it, but it's just going to make me not want to watch her matches anymore. I'm cool with her turning heel, but don't make her turn heel like that just because you want to give her a belt. I just don't like it. And there's so many other women wrestlers in WWE I can't even name. But now I got AEW. And AEW, they have Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, from Pittsburgh, which that helps. That helps me. But she's also one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever watched. And even who she fought, Statlander, thought she was pretty damn good too. And then you just got Jamie Hayter, you got Thunder Rosa, and as I said, so many other names. And now you have Ruby Soho, she's going by. Ruby Riott from WWE is now in AEW as Ruby Soho. And she was phenomenal. And I think whenever I watched her in WWE, I wasn't impressed. I was like, what is going on? Who is this chick? And now in AEW, I think she's been able, even in that one match, she was able to spread her wings a little bit. And now I'm a fan. So that's just another aspect of how AEW is making wrestling great again. If you want to say it that way. They're just allowing people to get behind the athletes they have. And they're not treating the fans like they're stupid. You know, they're making us think. They're entertaining us. They're giving us storylines that we care about. They're not giving us, this is the guy, you have to like him. Even though that works for Roman Reigns. That's the best thing they could have done for Roman Reigns, is make him that head of the table you know, role. Because that was the only way you were going to get people to be entertained by him, was turning him heel at this point. When you tried to turn him face for way too long. So anyway, I'm hoping to talk more about pro wrestling. Like I said, it's going to have to be a pretty big thing to happen for me to talk about it. Who knows? Maybe in the next year, we see WWE versus AEW somewhere down the line. I don't see Vince McMahon doing it. I think Vince McMahon thinks that he's in another... He doesn't call them pro wrestlers. He calls them superstars. And it's sports entertainment. And I guess that's how you get to the mainstream. But now, when you have people like me, people like Herman, who grew up with good wrestling, who don't want to watch the PG, colorful whatever that's on the USA Network and Fox, you're losing us. You're losing us. And that means when I eventually have kids and Herman's family eventually watch wrestling, it won't be your brand of wrestling, Vince McMahon. It'll be Tony Khan's version of wrestling. So, that's all I have to say about that.